I had always believed that family meant trust, love, and protection, but nothing could have prepared me for the cruel betrayal I was about to face. My son, Mark, and his wife, Laura, invited me on a luxurious trip abroad, claiming it would be a joyous vacation. I was excited, unsuspecting, imagining laughter and memories. But the moment I arrived, the floor beneath me shifted. With forged documents, they had me committed to a foreign psychiatric hospital, pretending I was delusional, all to steal the fortune I had spent a lifetime building. Days passed in isolation, disbelief, and humiliation, but I never lost hope. And then, in a daring, desperate move, I escaped. I crossed borders, defied rules, and returned to my home unannounced. When my son and his wife returned, expecting my absence to be permanent, they walked into a living room they would never forget, and into the surprise I had carefully prepared for them. My name is Clara Whitman, and I'm 62 years old. I had spent a lifetime building a successful career, traveling the world, and creating a secure, comfortable life for myself. More than anything, I cherished my family, especially my son Mark, whom I raised with love, patience, and sacrifice. Little did I realize, the boy I adored had grown into a man whose sense of entitlement and greed had silently festered beneath the surface. I never saw the small manipulations, the subtle hints of impatience and frustration as signs of betrayal. The world I trusted, my home, my family, my fortune, was about to be turned upside down. And I was completely unaware that the very people I loved most were preparing to trap me in a nightmare I could never have imagined. When Mark and his wife Laura called to invite me on a luxurious trip abroad, I was thrilled. I pictured sightseeing, shared meals, laughter, and memories that would last a lifetime. Packing my bags, I felt giddy with anticipation, completely trusting their intentions. They promised relaxation and a celebration of family togetherness, and I allowed myself to believe in the joy of their words. I never suspected that this invitation, presented with such warmth and charm, was a carefully constructed trap. Each detail of the trip, from the hotel bookings to the itinerary, was meticulously planned to make me feel safe and eager, masking the sinister plan that awaited. As I boarded the plane, my heart was light, completely unaware that this journey would soon become a battle for survival and justice. Landing in the foreign country, I marveled at the unfamiliar sights, the colors of the streets, and the strange yet fascinating language spoken around me. The excitement of travel filled me with wonder, and I clung to the joy of family bonding. Mark and Laura were charming, attentive, and seemingly concerned for my comfort, further convincing me that the trip was genuine. I trusted them completely, never questioning the sudden changes in their demeanor, the whispered conversations, or the subtle glances shared between them. Everything appeared perfect, and yet, beneath the smiles and pleasantries, danger lurked. The first steps I took in this foreign land unknowingly brought me closer to betrayal, and I was blissfully unaware that my freedom, safety, and fortune were about to be threatened in ways I could never have imagined. The moment of horror arrived faster than I could process. Mark and Laura guided me to what they claimed was a routine health evaluation, but the building I entered was cold, sterile, and unwelcoming. Confusion flooded me as staff members approached with papers and procedures I didn't understand. Before I could ask questions, the truth hit. They had me committed to a psychiatric facility using falsified documents, declaring me delusional and unstable. Betrayal surged through my veins, a burning anger replacing my shock. The people I had trusted most, the son I raised, the daughter in law I had welcomed into my family, had orchestrated this humiliation to seize my fortune. I felt trapped, frightened, and isolated, yet a spark of defiance flickered within me, promising that this injustice would not go unanswered. Reality crashed down on me like a wave. I was alone, bound by laws and papers I had never signed, in a foreign country where no one would question my confinement. The staff acted according to the fraudulent documents, treating me as unstable, ignoring my protests, and denying me freedom. The betrayal was complete. I had been manipulated, deceived, and imprisoned by the very family I trusted. Fear tried to take hold, but beneath it, determination began to grow. I would not be a passive victim. Though isolated, powerless, and surrounded by strangers, I began mentally cataloging the weaknesses, observing patterns, and noting opportunities. This betrayal had awoken something primal inside me, a desire for survival, cunning, and ultimately revenge. The days dragged on with suffocating monotony. Alone in the sterile room, the silence was broken only by distant voices and the occasional staff member entering to check vitals or administer medication. Fear gnawed at me, but I refused to succumb. I studied the staff's routines meticulously, memorized shifts, and noticed minor flaws in security procedures. Every interaction, every detail became a potential advantage. While they believed they had succeeded, I was quietly preparing. Isolation became my teacher, fear my motivator. I allowed the anger and disbelief to sharpen my mind. I would escape, I decided, and when I did, justice would be mine. This confinement, meant to break me, was instead forging the strategy that would undo them. As the nights grew longer, I began visualizing my freedom with precise clarity. I discovered gaps in the security cameras, noted the predictable routines of the guards, and identified the moments when staff were distracted. Every small observation was a potential stepping stone to escape. I imagined the shock on Mark and Laura's faces when I returned, alive and triumphant, and it fueled my resolve. Plans formed in my mind like a map, detailing every movement, every obstacle, and every necessary deception. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me now served as a catalyst for revenge. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was a strategist, a survivor, and a force that no greed or deceit could suppress. Freedom, and the reckoning that would follow, was within reach. Confined within the sterile walls of the psychiatric hospital, I began studying every detail, determined to turn my captivity into an advantage. Each staff member had predictable habits: the nurse who always lingered a few seconds too long at the door, the guard whose attention wavered during late night rounds, the receptionist distracted by phone calls. I meticulously documented each weakness in my mind, imagining how I could exploit these patterns. Every meal delivery, every medication schedule, every shift change became a piece of the puzzle. Though physically trapped, my mind was alert and calculating. I refused to be a helpless victim. Instead, I transformed fear into strategy, observing and analyzing, preparing for the moment when opportunity would strike. By knowing the routines and vulnerabilities, I was already one step ahead of the people who thought they had imprisoned me forever. Every corridor, door, and window became a map in my mind. I memorized each potential route, noting exits that were unguarded at predictable times and the blind spots in surveillance cameras. Tiny items I collected secretly: a loose nail from a bedside table, a pen, even a small piece of wire, became tools in my growing arsenal. Each object seemed insignificant alone, but together, they formed the foundation of my escape plan. I rehearsed routes mentally, envisioning each step with precision, imagining what I would do if I were spotted or challenged. Even in isolation, I maintained constant vigilance, ensuring that every small opportunity was noted and could be exploited. My mind became a battlefield of strategy, mapping every possibility while remaining calm and invisible in the eyes of my captors. Over time, I noticed cracks in the hospital's rigid system. Nurses forgot to lock doors properly, guards lingered in chatty conversations, and certain hallways were left unmonitored during shift changes. Each instance of negligence was carefully catalogued, providing a window of opportunity for me to act. I began planning around these lapses, pretending to comply with rules while mentally rehearsing every step of my escape. Even the smallest oversight, a distracted glance or a delayed check-in, was noted as a potential advantage. The environment that was meant to imprison me now became my teacher, teaching patience, timing, and the art of observation. Every day I waited, I grew more confident, knowing that these tiny errors would soon become the stepping stones of my freedom. During one quiet afternoon, I befriended a fellow patient named Sophia, whose soft spoken nature hid a sharp intellect. She shared critical knowledge about the hospital's routines, the exact timing of shift rotations, and overlooked rules that could work in my favor. Her insight became invaluable. She unknowingly supplied me with details that would have taken weeks to discover on my own. I listened intently, storing every bit of information, asking subtle questions without revealing my own intentions. Trusting her, I gained both an ally and a source of intelligence, turning an otherwise lonely and desperate situation into an advantage. With Sophia's guidance, the contours of my escape plan became clearer, and the path to freedom began to take shape in my mind with calculated precision. Every interaction became a performance. I complied with staff instructions, nodded during conversations, and acted subdued, ensuring that no one suspected I was plotting my escape. Meanwhile, I meticulously synchronized my plans with the hospital's schedule, timing meals, medications, and staff rounds to maximize opportunity. Each action was deliberate, every smile or nod calculated to avoid raising alarms. I rehearsed contingencies in my mind, imagining what I would do if I were challenged or intercepted. My outward appearance of compliance lulled the staff into a false sense of security, while my mind worked tirelessly on the precise sequence of moves that would ensure success. I knew that patience was as vital as courage, and that a single misstep could undo all my efforts. In secret, I began practicing movements that would be essential during my escape: slipping doors, climbing slight obstacles, and handling small tools. I ran through scenarios mentally, imagining every potential challenge and testing my physical limits within the confines of my room. Each practiced motion became second nature, instinctive, reducing the risk of error when the critical moment arrived. Even my breathing and posture were adjusted to appear calm and compliant in the eyes of the staff. By the end of several days, I felt more confident, knowing that my mind and body were synchronized for action. The escape, once a distant dream, now felt tangible, each rehearsal a step closer to reclaiming my freedom and exacting justice. Finally, everything aligned. I had memorized routes, secured tools, observed every lapse, and mentally rehearsed the escape dozens of times. The night approached like a predator, bringing both fear and anticipation. I waited for the perfect moment, when the guards were distracted, the cameras covered, and the doors unsecured. My pulse raced, but my mind remained clear, focused on every detail I had painstakingly prepared. Every second brought me closer to freedom, and the tension was almost unbearable. I knew that a single mistake could cost me everything, but I also understood that patience, precision, and courage would carry me through. The first step of my escape was ready, and soon, the nightmare of betrayal would begin to crumble under the weight of my determination. The night was dark, the hospital corridors silent except for the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Heart pounding, I moved like a shadow, every step deliberate, every breath measured. Guards patrolled at predictable intervals, and I slipped past them with precision, timing my movements to the rhythm of their routine. Each door, each hallway was a calculated obstacle I navigated with patience and focus. Fear tried to grip me, but determination burned brighter. This was my moment to reclaim control. One misstep could lead to recapture, humiliation, or worse, but I refused to let terror dominate me. As I crept through the building, the thrill of freedom surged, mingled with adrenaline, sharpened senses, and a growing satisfaction that the betrayal meant nothing if I could outsmart them tonight. Halfway through my escape, a locked service door threatened to derail my plan. Panic briefly flickered, but I quickly assessed the situation, recalling the small tools I had collected: a pen, a loose wire, and a hairpin. With careful precision, I manipulated the lock, my fingers trembling but controlled. A slight creak echoed, but the guard outside remained oblivious, engrossed in his phone. My mind raced, evaluating alternatives and contingency routes as I slipped through the doorway. Every obstacle now felt like a test, sharpening my focus and resolve. I realized that fear could be an ally if harnessed correctly. Each problem I solved reinforced my confidence. I was not only escaping physically, but mentally outmaneuvering the people who had sought to trap me in a foreign nightmare. Outside the hospital walls, I navigated the streets under the cloak of night, relying on the hidden escape routes I had memorized. Border checkpoints loomed ahead, but I had prepared false documents and diversionary tactics to evade suspicion. Every interaction with authorities demanded careful composure, the slightest misstep risking immediate recapture. I moved with purpose, blending into shadows, using my knowledge of local geography to bypass scrutiny. Hours stretched, each step a mixture of tension and exhilaration, until I finally crossed into safety, far from the hospital and its false accusations. Exhausted but unbroken, I breathed deeply, savoring the first taste of freedom. This was more than escape. It was the beginning of reclaiming my life and the first victory in a battle my betrayers could never have anticipated. Once safely hidden, I contacted Michael, my trusted lawyer, using a secure line to avoid detection. I relayed the entire sequence of events: the fraudulent commitment, the hospital's complicity, and my successful escape, while outlining initial thoughts for the next steps. Michael immediately grasped the gravity of the situation and began preparing legal strategies, financial safeguards, and social maneuvers to protect my fortune and expose Mark and Laura. Our conversation was precise, tactical, and filled with urgency. While physically exhausted, I felt an overwhelming sense of empowerment. I had survived betrayal, outwitted my captors, and now had allies ready to transform courage into calculated justice. Every detail of my ordeal was documented, and every weak point of my son and daughter in law's plans was being systematically prepared for the perfect counterattack. Knowing that Mark and Laura would soon realize I was missing, I carefully planted subtle false clues to mislead them. Emails, misdirected messages, and carefully timed hints created confusion about my whereabouts. Each clue suggested indecision, hesitation, or even vulnerability, luring them into false confidence while I remained safely hidden. My mind calculated every potential reaction, predicting how they might respond to rumors and misinformation. The psychological pressure worked in my favor. Every frantic call they made, every whispered plan to cover up their betrayal, became part of the evidence I collected for later. By manipulating their perception, I bought myself valuable time to orchestrate the final stages of my revenge, turning their arrogance and greed into tools for their eventual downfall. To remain undetected, I arranged temporary transport and accommodations in foreign locations, carefully maintaining secrecy while planning my ultimate return. Each booking, each reservation was tactical, designed to keep me invisible while monitoring Mark and Laura's movements remotely. From afar, I observed their growing panic and overconfidence, noting every lapse, every arrogance fueled decision. Simultaneously, I refined the final surprise, the moment when they would confront the consequences of their betrayal. Every logistic detail was coordinated with Michael, ensuring legal, financial, and psychological pressure would converge at the perfect moment. Exhaustion from travel and stress was real, yet anticipation burned brighter. Every small step brought me closer to turning betrayal into retribution, escape into empowerment, and fear into the perfect reckoning. From a safe distance, I watched Mark and Laura with meticulous attention. Their sense of victory, their flaunting of control, and their casual boasting made them increasingly reckless. Emails were carelessly sent, decisions taken without caution, and trust placed in the wrong allies. Every overconfident gesture was a potential lever for my final plan. I cataloged weaknesses, moments of arrogance, and predictable patterns, preparing to exploit them upon my return. Watching their entitlement unfold reinforced my resolve. They believed they had won, but they were walking into a trap crafted with precision, patience, and intelligence. The thrill of the approaching reckoning, combined with the knowledge of their inevitable shock, fueled my determination, ensuring that when the moment came, their betrayal would be punished fully and publicly. I didn't announce my return outright. That would have been too easy. Instead, I allowed whispers to travel, carefully planted hints shared with old acquaintances, former business partners, and distant relatives who couldn't resist gossip. A casual mention here, a vague question there, all designed to sound accidental. Has anyone heard from Clara lately? I let the rumor breathe, grow, and mutate. Within days, those whispers reached Mark and Laura, wrapped in uncertainty and disbelief. I imagined their confusion, the sleepless nights, the sudden tightening in their chests. They had buried me in their minds, convinced I was silenced forever. Now doubt crept in like poison, unsettling their confidence. I stayed invisible, watching from afar, knowing fear works best when it has no clear source. Soon after the rumors began, small disruptions appeared in their perfect illusion of control. Bank transactions were delayed. Accounts were flagged for review. Long trusted contacts stopped returning calls. None of it was dramatic, yet, but it was enough to rattle them. I had instructed my lawyer to trigger routine audits and compliance checks that appeared coincidental, harmless on the surface. Mark grew irritable, Laura defensive, both scrambling for explanations. They blamed banks, advisors, even each other. Watching them unravel was almost poetic. Every inconvenience chipped away at their arrogance, forcing them to confront a possibility they refused to accept: that I was not gone, not broken, and certainly not defeated. The cracks were forming, and they had no idea how deep they would go. While Mark and Laura spiraled, Michael worked quietly and efficiently. Every asset was secured, every power of attorney revoked, every loophole they once relied on sealed shut. Trust structures were reinforced, access restricted, and emergency clauses activated. On paper, it looked like standard legal housekeeping. In reality, it was a fortress rising around my fortune. Any attempt they made to interfere triggered alerts, paper trails, and legal consequences. I felt a deep sense of control return, stronger than ever before. They had tried to erase me to steal what I built, but now, the law stood firmly on my side. Their reach shortened, their influence shrank, and for the first time since my confinement, I slept knowing they could no longer touch what was mine. To keep them careless, I fed them exactly what they wanted to believe. Through intermediaries, I allowed hints that I was confused, unstable, and struggling abroad. A missed call at the right moment. A message sent, then quickly deleted. The illusion of weakness was deliberate. Mark's tone softened with false concern. Laura's arrogance returned. They believed I was still lost, still fractured, still easy to control. That belief made them reckless. They stopped guarding their words and stopped hiding their actions. I watched them relax into their cruelty, convinced they were untouchable. Playing vulnerable was the hardest role I'd ever performed, but it was also the most effective. The more they underestimated me, the deeper they stepped into their own trap. Their confidence became their undoing. Private conversations turned sloppy. Emails were written without caution. Voice notes were sent joking about how easy it was and how no one would ever question their decisions. They spoke of the hospital, the documents, the plan, casually, arrogantly. Every word was recorded, archived, preserved. Michael ensured nothing was lost. They believed they were confessing into a void, never suspecting they were building the evidence against themselves. I listened to their voices, not with anger anymore, but with clarity. This wasn't revenge driven by rage, it was justice shaped by patience. They had told their own story, and soon, the world would hear it exactly as they had spoken it. Instead of a single explosive reveal, I orchestrated controlled confrontations. Financial advisors asked uncomfortable questions. Medical boards reopened files. Legal notices arrived requesting clarification. Each interaction exposed another layer of deception. Mark tried to explain, Laura tried to deflect, but the narrative no longer obeyed them. They began contradicting each other, rewriting timelines, stumbling over lies they could no longer track. I stayed unseen, pulling strings with precision. The beauty of it was in the pacing, slow enough to terrify them, fast enough to prevent escape. Every confrontation tightened the net, forcing them closer to the truth they had tried to bury. Their betrayal was documented, undeniable, and closing in. The moment of realization came quietly. Their voices changed. Confidence gave way to fear. Questions turned desperate. They finally understood they hadn't destroyed me, they had created something far more dangerous. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was executing a plan. Watching their panic unfold was surreal. The same people who once signed papers to erase me now feared a knock at the door, a phone call, a summons. I felt no guilt, only a calm certainty. They had underestimated my intelligence, my resilience, and my will to survive. The tension was no longer mine to carry, it belonged to them. And the final reckoning was closer than they ever imagined. Keep watching, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. After days of meticulous planning, I returned to my home quietly, taking a back entrance that I had observed during my previous visits. From a shadowed corner, I watched Mark and Laura unpack their luggage, laughing as if their scheme had succeeded. Their overconfidence, their casual arrogance, and their complete ignorance of my return fueled a quiet, cold satisfaction within me. I noticed details I could exploit: misplaced receipts, hidden cameras in the living room, and a guest list they had casually ignored. Every subtle gesture, every careless action, became fodder for the plan I had prepared. This home, once a place of betrayal, was now my stage. I would make them realize in the most unexpected way that their victory was only an illusion. I began leaving subtle clues around the house: a handbag in a conspicuous spot, personal notes subtly rearranged, documents slightly exposed to catch attention. Nothing overt, yet enough to make Mark and Laura pause, exchange nervous glances, and feel the first tendrils of doubt. I watched as their confidence began to waver, each small revelation planting seeds of fear and suspicion. The illusion of my ignorance was gone. I was invisible, yet omnipresent. Every whisper they had ever shared in private now felt as if it could be overheard. Every careless boast became dangerous. Their minds began to unravel, all because they thought they had full control. This psychological chessboard was mine to manipulate, and I relished their growing paranoia. I arranged for an unexpected visitor, a longtime friend and respected community figure, someone Mark and Laura would fear and respect, to arrive unannounced. The moment they saw the guest, their composure faltered. I orchestrated it perfectly. The guest asked seemingly casual questions, eliciting panicked reactions, revealing their lies and their greed. Every gesture, every slip, and every contradicting statement was being documented, recorded, and absorbed. I stood silently, letting the situation unfold naturally, watching as their false facade crumbled under the weight of exposure. Their guests' unexpected presence amplified the tension, forcing them to confront the reality they had tried to bury. It was the first true victory in the long chain of retribution. Using carefully gathered proof, documents, recordings, and eyewitness testimonies, I exposed their plot in front of neighbors, staff, and the guest. Mark's and Laura's faces turned pale as the chain of evidence was revealed: forged documents, secret bank transfers, false medical claims. Every lie, every attempt to manipulate, every deceitful word was laid bare. They tried to speak, to explain, but each excuse collided with undeniable facts. The humiliation was immediate and electric, leaving them speechless. The community, once oblivious, now saw the depth of betrayal. I remained composed, calm, and in control, knowing that justice had taken shape in the most visible, undeniable way possible. Their attempts at dominance were shattered publicly, and I had orchestrated it flawlessly. Mark fell to his knees, voice trembling, attempting to justify his actions, while Laura tried to cry, manipulate, and plead. But I did not flinch. Years of betrayal had steeled me. Each word they spoke was met with calm scrutiny. Every tear or excuse failed to move me. I knew the law, the evidence, and the psychological hold were all on my side. Their pleas, their attempts at emotional manipulation, were empty gestures against the careful web of justice I had spun. I remained resolute, unwavering, letting them experience the full weight of the consequences their greed had invited. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and they could no longer escape the reality of their own making. The aftermath was swift and irreversible. Authorities froze financial assets, community influence vanished, and friends who once admired them now turned away. Invitations, connections, and social privileges evaporated. Mark and Laura's carefully crafted image was destroyed, leaving them isolated, shamed, and powerless. I observed as their world collapsed under the weight of truth and public scrutiny. The very structures they had relied on, their charm, entitlement, and deceit, were stripped from them completely. Justice had been delivered not just legally, but socially and psychologically. Every consequence had been anticipated, every weakness exploited, leaving no room for escape. Their arrogance had fueled the downfall, and the satisfaction of witnessing it was complete. Finally, in the quiet aftermath, I allowed myself a moment to breathe and reflect. Betrayal had been met with patience, cunning, and precision. My escape had become more than survival, it was empowerment. I had turned fear, isolation, and deceit into a masterfully executed plan for justice. Every decision, every observation, every strategic move had culminated in the complete undoing of those who sought to harm me. I felt a profound sense of strength, clarity, and peace. Life had tested me, but I emerged victorious, smarter, and wiser. Betrayal had not broken me. It had forged me into someone unstoppable, someone capable of protecting what was rightfully mine, and someone who had reclaimed her life with dignity, strategy, and unstoppable resolve.